What's up, Flanowers? We are back for Monday Night Football. Cowboys at Raiders should be I think it'll be a fun game fantasy-wise, possibly high scoring in this one. We're going to be breaking it down position by position, starting with quarterbacks and running backs, receivers, tight ends, defenses, and kickers. I'm, of course, here as usual with Adam, ShipMyMoney, Scherer, to break the whole thing down. Adam, how was your Sunday, and how are you feeling about this slate?
Sunday was pretty normal. Like, it's just been the same season over and over and over for me, where like a lot of stuff goes either the stuff that goes poorly is like injuries and shit like yesterday, but it's like, a lot of the guys that stay healthy that I'm on do well, but then lineups just don't come together. It was just like more of the same. I think on the main slate, my best finish in like the large field, like $5 was like, I don't know, 120th or something, like out of 70,000. Just it was another normal week, like slight losses, nothing crazy, but like no sweat either.
Yeah, I had not a great week, which I guess makes sense because I really leaned in on Jalen Warren. I really was like running backs against the Bengals just works every week, and then of course he got hurt, and I had a little bit of Kenneth Gainwell, but it was like 2% Kenneth Gainwell, 45%, 50% I think on FanDuel of Jalen Warren. So it was like did not actually go that well for me. Despite running back still hitting against the Bengals, just didn't have enough of the one I needed. I really like Kamani Vidal. He got hurt. I actually leaned in pretty hard on the Chargers passing game. Just like I thought, of course, the Chargers are going to be able to score a lot of points here, and then they just sucked. So
Yeah,
it was tough.
that was one. So like the Chargers were showing up well for me, and I considered them in like the 222 on FanDuel, and I ended up kind of just buying into like the 1 o'clock narrative. Was kind of like it was just like I didn't like it didn't feel good, even though like it projected well. And so like I'm sitting there trying to think of like a reason to get off of it and go to somewhere else. And I'm like, West Coast team playing 1 o'clock game, like I can go somewhere else. And then yeah, they were terrible. How bad, by the way, are Warren and Vidal hurt? Have you seen? Because I have them both on my one season long team that I play.
I know Warren said that he could have come back into the game apparently, so I think Warren should be fine. And Vidal, it's unclear, but they have a bye week this week, so it'll probably be and they probably get Omar in Hampton back in week 13, I think. So might not matter that much anyway.
Yeah, I traded Barkley on that team last week, and so then I see Warren get hurt and Vidal get hurt, and I'm just like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah, no, that was kind of shitty. I had the opposite feeling. I was like, oh, this is awesome for the Chargers. Like they should be able to score so easily against the Jaguars. And then I saw somebody pointed out that it was a West Coast team traveling east, which honestly is not something that I historically have factored in. But it was like the one thing that I was like, maybe I need to be factoring that in. But I didn't. Excuse me. Got something in my throat. So I just ended up playing it straight, played a lot of Oronde Gadsden, played the receivers. I also might have been hedging to some extent. I know what you and I have talked about. The only thing I really care about right now is my eliminator team, which was facing Ladd McConkey. So I was like, of course, Ladd McConkey is gonna crush. And then he put up like 2.6 half PPR points. He was terrible, which is awesome. I loved it, but also it killed my DFS teams.
That was the other thing, was like the Chargers teams that were showing up for me had McConkey, and I looked at the schedule adjusted fantasy points thing, and like the slot receivers against the Jags have just been like awful. And I'm like, again, like I don't actually care about this, but I really, for whatever reason, don't want to play this team. So I will use that as an excuse to not do it also.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, if you're looking for a reason to not play someone, you can usually find it somewhere.
Yeah.
We are, of course, going to be starting with quarterbacks here. Let's go. Oh, and by the way, if you have not already done so, please do like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys coming here and hanging out with us. But trying to get to 6,000 subscribers by the end of the NFL season and could use your support. Yeah, JMO went really well. AJ Brown looked like he should have done really well. He was my other big stance yesterday. Didn't end up doing that well. Just like wasn't looking good. Like he was targeted quite a bit. Just didn't really work out for AJ Brown. So kind of a hit and miss kind of
second best game he's had all year.
Sadly, yes. so like he was fine from an AJ Brown perspective, but it's like he's always just crushed against man coverage. They play a lot of man. I was like, all right, this is the spot for AJ Brown, and just I don't know, doesn't look totally engaged. We're gonna start here with quarterbacks, and we can start with Dak Prescott is 10,400 projected for 50% flex ownership, 18% captain ownership. That seems reasonable to me. Looks like that's about what I'm getting, although I'm underweight at captain. how much you getting to? How much you planning on playing Dak tonight?
Yeah, getting a good amount of Dak as you would expect. It's Dak, solid, spot. Obviously, a really good offense in general. I'm getting to 70% at flex, 14% at captain. So over the field at flex, a little bit under at captain, but mostly in line. Again, just getting to a lot of him. Going to be one of the highest projected guys on the slate. I think you can reasonably argue for either him or Lamb, but I think those are pretty much going to be the two highest projected guys. Obviously, Bowers is up there too, but I think a step behind. So, yeah, going to get to a lot of Dak. Obviously, not going to run a ton, but you have the other highest projected guy on the slate to pair him with. You have other solid receiving options to pair him with as well.
Yeah. And Dak, I would say I'm probably always stacking him, probably multi-stacks generally when I have him in the captain spot. Although it's a little bit maybe more viable to single stack him than most non-running quarterbacks because he has one rushing touchdown in the season, I think. But mostly because his receivers are so expensive. Like all of like CeeDee Lamb is probably appropriately priced, but you could argue that George Pickens is overpriced for his role with CeeDee Lamb there, but regardless, he's expensive. And Jake Ferguson is 7,400. So just given that all of them are like relatively expensive, maybe you can argue for Dak single stack a captain. Do you have you looked at your lineups? Do you have any idea if you're getting to that?
So where I do have Dak at captain, Cowboys onslaught.
Okay.
No, that's a double stack. Never mind. Thought it was single. Yeah, it's still a lot of multi-way stacks. I do agree with you just from like a theory standpoint. Like the more expensive, obviously, that the wide receiver one is, the more likely it is that you can get away with just Dak plus Lamb, because like Lamb at that point still has to put up a monster score. And then the secondary receivers are expensive to where like George Pickens scoring a touchdown is good for Dak, but it doesn't necessarily make George Pickens, for example, optimal just based on that one touchdown. So like I think you can get away with it a little bit easier with the pricing the way it is, like you said. That being said, I'm still primarily in my Dak captain lineup, still getting to either the Lamb Pickens double stack that you would really want, or mixing in Flournoy or Turpin or Ferguson or whatever.
Yeah, makes sense. On the other side, we have Geno Smith is 8,800 projected for 50% flex ownership, 6% captain ownership. Now we look at schedule adjusted metrics. This is the second best matchup for quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. And this is a good point to bring in Steven's question. Will Quinnen Williams and Logan Wilson make a market improvement on the Dallas defense? So it's been a terrible defense just across the board all season. Quinnen Williams was the top run stuffer on the Jets. I think he's made the Pro Bowl multiple times. Like he's a really good defensive run stuffer and generally just a good defender. And then Logan Wilson expected to be the play caller, like, or no, not play caller, the defender who like tells everybody, communicates with everybody about the plays. I'm forgetting what the terminology is here, but potentially, improves the communication within the defense. Also, I guess he was traded for a 7th round pick, so I don't think that he's like a huge difference maker. But yeah, they added a couple improvements to the defense. Do you have any take on how much this is going to affect how well the defense plays?
Yeah, I mean, I think like in general, answering this is like it's really difficult to like quantify in the sense of, adding this one or these two players to a defense moves the projection for Ashton Genty 0.6 point, like it's really, really difficult to do that. I think the important thing always to keep in mind, especially at the beginning when you're guessing and you don't have 3 or 4 weeks of, well, this is what has happened, let's start weighing that in, is you always have to keep the baseline in check. Like I know there's just always a tendency for people in general, whether in this situation and in others, to like latch on to one data point and it just becomes like the most important thing. Something like, not that I've seen it said, and this is obviously an extreme example, but oh, you can't run because they have Quinnen Williams or something. Like
Right.
you don't want to do that, because the baseline for this defense is that they're absolute trash. And so an improvement probably means they are less bad. It's less likely that they suddenly are like a good defense or a defense that you don't want to target. So like it's obviously very difficult to put a specific adjustment number on it. And then the other thing to keep in mind too is like you can still lean on Vegas, obviously, in these situations too. Like I've said a lot of times in the past that I always think it's funny how heavily some people lean on like player props because we know that's a beatable market. So using that as like, the end all of something is kind of funny because like you can just build projections to beat it. But we know that sides like total spreads, etc., are very, very difficult to beat. This game still has a 49 point total. It's a 3.5 point spread. It's not like, suddenly the line suggests that the Cowboys aren't going to give up points. And you still can look at player props and use that also, if you're kind of trying to like dial stuff in, I don't have in front of me what Ashton Genty's rushing projection was, but I know last time I looked, it was still, relatively healthy. It's not like he's down to like a 50-yard prop or something like that. So, I mean, I think the basic answer is like, from like a granular DFS standpoint, I don't think there is like an answer to like it moves it this much. I think it's just like they're probably better than they were, and they probably are still bad.
Yeah, I think that's generally my take also. Just like, yeah, it probably doesn't help. Like I would rather play Ashton Genty against the Cowboys defense from 3 weeks ago when we knew it was terrible, because like it could make some slight difference, but like in general, it's going to be probably just a marginal difference. But really, like we haven't seen it yet, or we don't really know to what extent and how quickly they all get together. Signal caller, by the way, was the terminology I was looking for Logan Wilson. No idea how much the signal caller, like I'm not going to pretend to know how impactful the change in signal caller is for a defense. So yeah, it could make some difference, but I'm not expecting it to be a drastic difference in the matchup for the Raiders. But Geno Smith in particular, it is the second best matchup for quarterbacks over the past 5 weeks. Geno, again, project for 50% flex ownership, 6% captain ownership. I'm actually getting to a lot at captain and a bit underweight at flex using the Sims. What do you get into with Geno?
Yeah, I'm not getting a ton. I mean, I have 33% at flex, but he's projected for 50% ownership. I have 9% at captain at 6% projection. So, technically over at captain, but like pretty close in terms of raw numbers, and then under the field in the aggregate, which I am kind of happy to see, just because one, I feel like I've been getting quarterbacks a lot this year when I don't necessarily want them. And so it's always nice when I don't have a lot. But also the thing that was interesting to me was if I had to, just from like, kind of looking at a sim run for the first time today and seeing where Geno's projection came out, if I had to like guess if he ends up being higher or lower projected by lock, like I think his projection right now is on the high end, and I'm still not getting a lot of him. So that's actually interesting to me. Like in the sim, the sim projected points, he's basically tied for third in projection behind Dak and Lamb. I think by lock, it probably gets to like probably, I mean, I guess he could stay there, but like maybe Genty moves ahead of him, maybe Bowers moves ahead of him. Either way, my point being, like, I definitely don't think that you're going to get like a Geno like separates and gets higher than Genty and Bowers than he is already. And there's a decent chance, I think, that he ends up actually getting a little bit lower relative to them, and he's still not showing up that often for me.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he gets steamed in terms of you're talking about ownership.
No. No, I'm talking about that. If anything, I think the projection that I have on him right now, the fantasy point projection is slightly high, and I'm still not getting to him that much.
I was like half listening, and then I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense for what I thought you were saying. But as far as ownership, I also think like it's unlikely that he gets steamed just because nobody wants to play Geno at 8,800. But yeah, I wouldn't. That would make sense because I'm getting to 17% Geno Smith, so it would make sense if the projection is a bit high right now. As far as Geno, probably always double stacking when you have him at captain, stacking regardless of where he is in your lineup. I would guess, just because doesn't have super expensive pass catchers, doesn't run a lot. So yeah, my guess would be when you have Geno at captain, you're typically going to want to have multiple pass catchers with him. Anything else at quarterback?
No, and I agree with you on that as far as the pass catchers go.
Steven says that's a good answer. We will see. I mean, I think that's the right answer. It's like it comes back to Adam in law school. You and I both learned it depends is like usually the best answer, or often the best answer. Is something they taught us as one else. Like, yeah, I think generally like the hot takey answer is what people want, but like the real answer a lot of the time is depends. We don't know. Just like it's kind of it's tough to give the answer. We haven't seen it yet. I don't want to just like make up an answer here.
Like
So
95% of my like Twitter arguments where like I piss people off because like I hate rookies or I hate whatever is literally me just saying like they're gonna be closer to the mean than people say that they are. And like
yeah,
that's literally it's the it depends argument basically. Like I've started it hasn't gotten too much pushback yet, but I'm sure it will. I've started it with Drake May because I
oh, yeah,
follow like it I follow for whatever reason, like I follow a disproportionate number of Patriots fans. So all I just see is like Drake May, future Hall of Famer, and it annoys me. So I've already started out on just like, yeah, he's probably good. I think he's good, but like he's probably not this good. But like it's the same thing with the rookies, the same thing with everything. He's like, and with this, like the answer is that it's gonna move towards the middle, and we'll see. I do think that there's a little bit more probably when you are talking about like a run stuffer compared to like a guy in the secondary or something like that, because like it is going to be harder to avoid the big fat guy in the middle that stops the run.
yeah,
Like, whereas you can design passing plays around, if you just throw like one good guy into the secondary, you can just like make him not be a factor, or like maybe he'll take away a player if he's shadowing him. But like it is harder to say, well, we're going to run the ball. We're just not going to let the guy that is going to be right in front of us have an impact.
yeah. Um, I do want to get back to just the Drake May thing. I think it's also so you might follow a disproportionate number of Patriots fans. It's also just fantasy football Twitter loves Drake May. Like
Oh, okay.
all of the fans, like he was
Well, I
everywhere.
don't follow them, to be fair.
I mean, yeah, maybe that's true, but you get into fights with a lot of fantasy football people all the time. So I think it's a combination of Patriots fans, but then also just like fantasy football Twitter is in love with them. And every single fantasy person I know is like, he was my guy. It was Drake May. Drake May is my guy. Everybody like has attached themselves to Drake May. So they're really loving it. So then for you to come out and be like, he's probably not gonna be a Hall of Famer is blasphemous. Yeah, considering what we're watching right now.
Yeah. I mean, my whole argument there is like everybody, I've seen, plenty of people make the schedule argument, which like, sure. But he got a 13-game head start and then got the easy schedule. Like, and it's not like, and to be fair, like I obviously last year, like I was really excited about Jaden Daniels as a Commanders fan, but like there was the non-fan part of me just sitting there like, yeah, this is going to come back to earth sooner than later, probably. But like, imagine if Jaden Daniels got to play 13 NFL games and then got last year's schedule that he ran
Right.
through.
Yeah. Fair. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big I think May is probably pretty good, but it is funny always watching you argue with
I
fantasy
think
football
Drake May
Twitter.
is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Nick from Underdog put Drake May first ballot Hall of Famer at plus 150 the other day.
Oh, that's right. I saw that argument. I saw you fighting with Pat Thorman, I think.
No, I mean, I think me and Pat get along.
Okay. But you still fight with people you get along with all the time.
Well, that is true. I don't remember getting into anything with Pat though.
Maybe I'm misremembering that. All right. Running backs.
With him actually.
Maybe I'm thinking of your conversation with Nick and then also saw your conversation with Pat, and I'm mixing up who you were arguing with versus agreeing with. Okay.
I am also overweight on Drake May in best ball too. Like that's always people like come at me with like, oh well, this is just because you didn't draft him in best ball. It's like, no, I did.
the rare one that you actually drafted, as opposed to the rookies that you didn't draft and hate on constantly. All right.
I drafted the good rookies. I just didn't draft the bad ones.
Oh, I drafted all of them. I drafted a lot of all of them.
I have Aguka and T-Mac.
Congrats on getting the rookies right. Bashal Tutin, of course, was looking like he was breaking out the last game. I was so.
Oh yeah,
excited.
how bad was that injury?
I think he after the game, his interview, he was just like, I think that was my best game. So like he didn't say like sucks that I'm out for a while.
Okay.
So I think just based on the way he handled the interview, I got the impression that he's probably going to be fine, but I don't know. Also, again, as you know, the only thing I care about right now is my one eliminator team, which has Travis Etienne and not Tutin. So
that's why I was asking. I have a ton of Etienne in best ball.
Yeah. All right. Running backs, Ashton Genty is 10,000 projected for 37% flex, 13% captain ownership. It's a great matchup. Again, looking at schedule adjusted for running backs, it's the fourth best matchup over the past 5 weeks. Again, Dallas did add Quinnen Williams. Maybe that throws a wrinkle into things, but so far it has been a great matchup. I'm getting to 46% in the flex, 9% at captain of Ashton Genty. How much are you getting to?
Yeah, similar spot there. And the other thing that I'll say about Genty, kind of like going back to what we were talking about with, the what impact is Quinn Williams going to have. This is the kind of spot where obviously with Run the Sims, you can just do it in a variety of ways. But like no matter what projections you're using or whatever you're doing, this is the kind of spot where I would pay more attention. Like I've said a lot in the past that generally at the end of my process, whatever I get is what I get, and that's what I'm going to play. But this is the kind of spot where like I would look back and say like, all right, am I getting a crazy amount of Ashton Genty? Because if I am, I do want to decide whether or not I'm actually comfortable with that, or do I want to say, okay, they do have Quinn Williams on defense now. Maybe we're not quantifying well enough the impact that's going to have. Maybe I do want to be a little bit lower on Genty than I'm getting. Like this is the kind of spot where I think that looking at my exposures, paying attention to what I'm getting, I want to make sure that I'm actually comfortable with it. And then also it is the kind of spot too, where a lot of times, and this is again is across the industry, like if you're paying for projections, you assume that you obviously inherently trust the people doing the projections. You think that they're good at it, whatever. So like usually if you get, you're talking about some wide receiver that's been in the exact same role for 10 weeks. If you look at their projection and you think it's wrong, you should be really hesitant to just like change it, because there's not a lot of like volatility or uncertainty that went into it. In a spot like this, you can talk to probably 10 different people doing projections and they're going to have handled it 10 different ways and have 10 different assumptions on the exact impact that it's going to have. So if you look at an Ashton Genty projection and you're like, that seems too high to me because I think Quinn Williams is really going to make things difficult, you should be like quicker to lower that sort of projection than I think CD Lamb is a point too low or a point too high, because like CD Lamb is kind of just like a known commodity.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a spot that, again, it's just a big unknown, like how much of an impact there is. I'd be surprised if there are, or I guess I would expect that most places doing projections are not going to overreact to the addition of a couple players on defense. Like it's not going
They'll
to be.
underreact if anything.
Yeah, exactly. So then, yeah, so you might need to, if you wanted to, you would overreact. Um, Genty looks
And
good.
again, I think underreacting is like the correct approach, but
Yeah, generally, right.
but like again, you're also trying to win in a one game sample. Like there's this kind of goes back to what we talked about at like end game with like doing projections for the masses versus like for yourself. The very likely correct quote unquote answer over a large sample size is that like again they get marginally better, but they're still a good matchup. But when you're trying to win in a one game sample for yourself, like you don't necessarily have to be completely like tied to what's going to happen in the long run. You can kind of, if you wanted to, just say like, I think that like directionally the industry isn't making enough of a move against Ashton Genty for Quinn Williams, so I'm going to just say fuck it and hope that like he really gets shut down this game, even if over the next 5 games the Cowboys are actually a good matchup. It doesn't matter because I already won my money in this one. Like, it's in volatile spots. Like you can also, even if it's not going to be like the correct long-term answer, you can kind of make the case for like just going against popular opinion in a stronger way.
Yeah. This is also a good point from Desiree. DeMarvion Overshawn is making his season debut at linebacker for the Cowboys. I think he's a good linebacker also. So
Yeah.
a lot of things are changing that could be impactful. So maybe the matchup gets worse, but it's still Ashton Genty. Pretty strong role. 2 games since the bye week, 32 carries, so 16 carries per game and 10 targets on 59% route participation. I'll take 16 carries and 5 targets for a running back any day. So the role looks really strong, even if the matchup is getting tougher.
Yeah, which your point and what we were talking about earlier, like everything is still relative. Like it's still a running back that is has the entire backfield to himself. And to like your law school, it depends argument. What if you could make the case, well, like, yeah, they're getting all these talented guys back that have never played together, and this is the first game playing together. So again, like, yeah, maybe week 14, this defense really gels and it's really good, but week 11, they still are playing with dudes they've never played with before.
Right.
Also unrelated to anything, and I don't mean this as a joke because obviously it's not funny. But in my head, every time I see Overshown's name, I think it's Nealand.
Marshawn Nealand, yeah.
And it really like throws me for a loop. like underdog tweeted, that Overshawn's coming off the injury report. And I'm like, wow, what a fucked up tweet. And
Right.
then like I realized, but like it's still every time I see it, it's just I get them mixed up and it keeps throwing me off.
Yeah. It took me a little while to like get those straight also, because I don't pay a ton of attention to defensive players as a fantasy player.
Yeah. And it's like they're not similar, but they're like still
Yeah.
the same like length sort of and like
Yeah. Same team.
similar enough.
Um, Beyond Ashton Genty, in 2 games since the bye, Raheem Mostert 1 carry, 2 targets on 7.7% route participation. Dylan Lobby not involved at all. Dylan Lobby is 200. I think is the best case you can make for him. Do you have any interest in the backup running backs on the Raiders?
I have 8% Lobby right now. Like you're hoping he catches a pass or two, and it's just that kind of game, which the Cowboys are a team that it's relatively likely to be that kind of game, just because going back to what you were saying before, like they are expensive, but also even though like obviously you don't think of the Raiders as this like high octane, really good offense, Genty's expensive, Bowers is expensive, Gino is relatively expensive. And then on the other side, you have Dak, you have Lamb, you have Pickens, you have Ferguson. So like it is the kind of slate where you have just so many good players that there's a little bit higher chance than usual that the winning lineup is just, oh, you needed like all the optimal guys, and then whatever guy is $200 and scores 1.2 points.
Right.
It's still not super likely, and it's not something that I would be going crazy getting to, but I am getting to 8 to 9% of him. Mostert, I'm getting like 1% at 2,400. Again, you need him to actually like do things at that price, probably. But there are ways that Dylan Lau be at $200 or Hunter Lepke on the other side at $400. Just end up being optimal because they get more than zero.
Yeah. And there's so I always like the backup running backs to some extent because they have so much contingent upside. Lobby, I think this is when it's sort of split contingent upside because I think it would be Mostert if Genty got hurt, Lobby in a blowout. So like I don't think they both have like multiple paths necessarily to contingent upside. I think it's more like there's one path for Mostert, one path for Lobby, which makes me like them both a bit less. But at $200, I think Lobby, like you said, 1 fantasy point, 0.1 fantasy point might be what you need from the $200 player. So looks okay. Makes some sense to get there.
That's the kind of exposure that I like. Like if you're playing 150 lineups, getting to that like 6-7%. I've had the issue in the past with Lepke in particular because it's like Dallas obviously just always has high priced guys. Where it's just like, oh, I have 80% Hunter Lepke, and that's not where I'd want to be. But getting that like 5 to 10% kind of feels like a sweet spot.
Agreed. So Genty, I'm getting to a lot. This scares me a bit. Javonte Williams, 9,800 projected for 32% flex ownership, 16% captain ownership. I only got to 24% in the flex, 1% at captain of Javonte Williams using those numbers. In terms of the matchup, it's still a strong matchup for Javonte Williams, 7th best matchup over the past 5 weeks in terms of schedule adjusted. Are you getting similar? Are you well under the field on Javonte Williams?
Yeah, and I think the projection might be low. I'm just not entirely sure why. But yeah, I'm not getting a lot of him right now either. He's in like 16% of my lineups at flex, 1% at captain. Definitely one of the spots that I'll have to take a closer look at throughout the day. But yeah, I mean, he's clearly the lead back here. Like, I assume Jaden Blue is going to be active again because they got rid of Malik Davis, I believe. But either way, like, you don't really expect whoever their backup is to have a huge role. You had Blue, inactive last week, I think it was, or last game, whatever. So it's clearly been Javonte Williams as the lead guy. It's a high scoring offense. You do lose some touchdown equity in the sense that you have Dak, you have Lamb, you have Pickens, like they will throw touchdowns, etc. But you also make some of that back in that they're going to have more opportunities to score touchdowns than most offenses do. It's a game with a high total in general. You expect that if they, you expect Williams to have a very high percentage of the Dallas rushing touchdowns that they do get. So I do think he looks good. Right now, he is projecting behind all of Prescott, Lamb, Gino, Genty, and Bowers, though. So I think that's why I'm not really getting there. And I do think that like all of that's reasonable. Like, I don't think any of those names, you look at it and you like say, oh, well, clearly Javonte Williams should be projected over them. You could argue several of them that, he could be, but the gap just seems a little bit big right now. So I think that like Williams probably ends up looking at least a little bit better by lock, but at the same time, he is $1,800 more than Bowers. He's $1,000 more than Geno. I could see preferring any of those guys over him relative to salary, but I think the gap's a little bit big right now.
Yeah, I wrote him up as one of my favorite captain options. So I'm like, oh man, I'm not getting too much Javonte, which scares me a bit. I probably will push up my exposure a bit to Javonte. It is worth noting that he did down the stretch last year, his efficiency numbers did drop quite a bit, and I thought we were starting to see it this year, but it's been back and forth. He like goes like 6.2 yards per carry to 2.2 to 3 to 5.5, 3.3. So it's been kind of back and forth in terms of his efficiency. I don't think there's much of a trend recently.
I saw something this morning too. I don't remember what the actual stat was. I remember it because it was like two clear studs. Whatever the stat was, it was showing like the top 4 guys in it this year. And it was like 2 clear, indisputable studs, Javonte Williams and Trevion Henderson. And I remember I saw Trevion Henderson and I was like, oh, people are going to make this annoying. And then I saw Javonte Williams and I was like, but I can use Javonte Williams as a counter. And yeah, I don't remember.
You're just like, you think of everything in terms of like, how can I argue about this? What can I say that's going to piss people off?
I think it might have been yards after contact.
Okay.
And I thought about it because that's what. So I had been talking about Trevion Henderson on Twitter the other day, and just half jokingly had put up, that he had 3.3 yards per carry, which is basically what Stevenson's done all season. And within that conversation, it was said that, like, I pointed out, my point was just that, like, Stevenson does have some redeeming qualities if you look at stats. And I pointed out yards after contact or for missed tackles, I think is what it was. And I was told that that's a stat for slow people, for slow running backs. And the leaderboard, there was a different leaderboard I saw today in missed tackles. And it's like Jahmyr Gibbs, Chan. It's just like fast dude, fast dude, fast dude, fast dude.
Yeah, I would think that that's entirely fast dudes. Missed tackles. I would think yards after contact would be for slow big dudes, and missed tackles would be more.
I don't remember which one it was, but there was fast dudes just like throughout the list.
That's funny. Yeah, it seems like bad analysis to say that's just a slow people stat. As far as the backup running back on Dallas, I think we just don't know because, again, last game, Jadon Blue was made inactive, and then it was Malik Davis took over the running back role. And then after that game, Malik Davis was waived, but then re-signed to the practice squad. So there's a chance that they call up Malik Davis to the practice squad, and it's going to be the same thing as last time. But I think it's at least a good sign for Jadon Blue that he was waived. Seems good because they said it was going to be a competition for the RB2 role. We got some negative coach speak on Jadon Blue. I think he fumbled the ball in his last active game. So that's a wait and see spot. Do they have 3 running backs active? Is like, do they even call up Malik Davis? Do they make Jadon Blue inactive again? Whatever. We just don't know. But that's one where if they only have one running back active outside of Lipke and Javonte Williams, I'll have a lot of interest in that running back. If both are active, it gets so gross that I'm like, I don't know how much I'll play of Jadon Blue or Malik Davis. But as of right now, it looks like you have Jadon Blue in there as the backup running back at 1,400, projected for 16% flex ownership. So that's higher ownership than you usually see on RB2, who was inactive in the last game. But projected with those, I got to 4% flex ownership. I assume you're not too far off there.
Yeah, I'm not really getting there either. One thing I will say is I think, and this again, like, you could disagree, it's a kind of loose assumption, but I think that if Malik Davis is activated and Blue is inactive, I do think that increases Javonte Williams' projection. Obviously, they've been hot and cold on Blue this season, but in the games that Jadon Blue has played, 14, 16, 23, and 26% rushing market share. Obviously, game environments vary in those games, but he hasn't had lower than a 14% rushing market share. Malik Davis in the 2 games he's been active, 6 and 5. 6 was a game that Blue was active. 5 was the game without. So I do think this is kind of like Chase Brown, for example. Like, Chase Brown's projection went up this week when Samaje Perine got ruled out because from everything we've seen, like, they weren't just going to throw Taj Brooks or that other dude they called up into a 25-30% rushing share like Samaje Perine had. I think It's the same kind of thing here, where it's not a guarantee that, like, Jadon Blue does still have a legitimate role, but we've seen Jadon Blue have a legitimate role when he is active. Whereas when he was inactive and only Malik Davis was active, it was a 71% rushing market share for Javonte Williams. That was his second highest of the entire season.
Yeah, I think that is a reasonable assumption that if it's Malik Davis that you project Javonte better. I think I would also like Malik Davis probably better only because of the price difference, because he's that $200 guy that could just get 0.4 and be the guy that you need. But yeah, I think like if only one of them is active, I probably would have interest in Jadon Blue if Malik Davis is inactive and he's the only RB2, again, for the contingent upside. But at 16% ownership, that's also, you don't usually see that on running back too. So it's going to be very contingent on what the ownership number actually ends up at. If it remains at 16%, then yeah, I guess it would make sense to be underweight. And I won't get to play my running back 2 trick that never works anyway.
Wait, you're telling me that cost on rookies matters?
Yeah, cost and ownership both matter a little bit.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think like if Blue is active and Davis is not, then again, like 1,400 I think is fine. But if 15-16% ownership would be, I think, a lot. You can see that in the flex rate column that the way he's projected right now, he had an 8% chance of being optimal at 1,400.
Yeah, which I mean, usually you see guys like him come in at 4 or 5%, so he would look good. Lipke 400, the Adam special, 1.8% projected flex ownership. I'm getting to 5%. I guess you're probably similar.
Yep. Everything I think that was said about Lauby applies to Lipke as well. Marginally better, I guess, if only one of Blue or Davis is active. But, it's not like you're expecting him to get carries either way. He's just obviously more likely to get a carry if he doesn't have 2 other running backs.
Yep. Over the past 2 games, 1 carry for Lipke, 0 targets, 7% route participation. It's probably more likely than not that he is a 0, but you don't need that much from him. And obviously could score a touchdown. It kind of seems like he's not. I feel like it's been years now that I've been thinking like Lipke, it would make sense for them to use him as a goal line back. But with Javonte, I think it makes less sense, or it's less likely that they're going to give him those goal line opportunities. But it's still, I think, some possibility, I guess. Yeah,
I mean, the kind of argument for him for 2 or 3 years now is that, like, in theory, they'll use him as like sort of a tight end too. Like, but they never actually do. It's just that I think there was like a quote one time 3 years ago that they could. And so now every showdown slate, it's just like, oh, well, maybe it'll be this time. And it never actually is this time.
Actually, now that you say it, I think that they did that again this summer. Because I remember that was the whole reason that I loved Kevontae Turpin in best ball, was like, oh, they're using him all over the place. They're trying him as a running back. I think they actually said the same thing about Lipke. Like, we're going to use him as a Swiss Army knife and use him as a fullback and a tight end. And I don't think that they have done that at all.
Yeah, we're going to use him as an H-back. And I was like, oh, I'm about to get like prime Chris Cooley at $200 and no ownership.
Yeah, the dream. 10.3 expected fantasy points through 9 games. So just over 1 expected fantasy point per game. Does he have any inside the 5? I'm looking in the wrong spot. I want to see if he has any inside the 5 carries this year. Because I feel like they're just giving those to Javonte, but worth looking.
This is why I don't listen to Coach Speak, by the way. It has me play guys 4 years down the road.
Yeah. 0 inside the 5 carries for Hunter Lipke, 0%. I should ask Scott to put in the raw data here, because I every time I look like, all right, how many is that actually? Because like it was Devin Achane versus Ollie Gordon is 50-50 in terms of inside the 5. And I'm like, is that just literally 1 apiece or like 2 apiece? Like I need that raw data. Anything else at running back?
No. Another comparison to with the like Jadon Blue, Malik Davis thing, I think, is to Travion Henderson from Thursday. Ended up obviously getting that like half right, half wrong, because Jennings was active. But the thought was, if Jennings is inactive, Henderson's projection goes up because they're going to use Johnson less than they'd use Jennings. Jennings was active. They just didn't play him. They used Johnson minimally, and you got more Henderson. It's the same kind of thing here, I think.
Yeah, makes sense. Prime Chris Cooley. Adam is just like Chess Liam in that all of his references are just to his own team.
Yeah.
All right.
And mine has a lot less good examples to use.
It's true. Wide receivers, starting with the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb is 11,000, projected for 39% flex, 13% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I get to 40% flex and 27% captain. So CeeDee Lamb popping in the Sims right now. Are you also getting to a lot of CeeDee Lamb?
Yep, 45% flex, 37 captain. He has a 16.5% optimal rate at captain right now, which is a little bit higher than his 13% ownership. So that looks good. Certainly one of those spots where, like, if you wanted to lower it a little bit more, you could. Like, you're playing it well over. It goes back, to your strategy, like how exploitative of the field you want to be versus balanced, because obviously he's a really good play. He's one of the most likely captain plays to succeed. He's still failing at captain 84% of the time. So if you're playing him 35, 36%, like, you are taking on a lot of risk there that you could diversify. But at the same time, did use the shady tool. It does factor all that in. And it's still, the benefits to being on him at only 13% owned still look really good. And part of that too, you always have to keep in mind that, like, whatever you would be turning some of that CD Lamb into, if that guy is like going over owned, then it's not necessarily helping you other than just balancing your risk a little bit. So it all, kind of comes down to personal play style. But I do think obviously getting to a lot of him is good. He's also somebody that I think does tend to get steamed a little bit, like, just, or not even steamed necessarily, just come in under projected because people really like to click CD Lamb for a good reason. So he is the kind of guy that we're like, if I see ownership projections saying, 13, 14, 15%, I kind of just like assume he's actually like 20, 21%.
Yeah, that's a good note with CeeDee Lamb. People do like playing CeeDee Lamb. He's definitely, you get some of those players that's like nobody ever wants to play him, and then others that everybody wants to play. I think CeeDee definitely falls into that second bucket. So could end up at like 20% captain, in which case he would look over owned according to the optimal rates.
Yeah.
So that is something to factor.
And there's a couple things too with the whole with what I just said. Like, one, people want to play him, but two, if you put CD Lamb's going to be 13% owned into a sim, you get something like CD Lamb in 30% of your lineups, and now suddenly CD Lamb is 20% owned because everybody just did that.
Yeah, also true. I'm pulling up. I think it's important to look at rates for everybody in the games with just with CD Lamb fully healthy, because that makes a pretty big difference. I think there's 3, 4, 5, 6 were those the games that Lamb was out, or 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to pull that up as we talk about the Cowboys receivers here, because George Pickens, if you look at George Pickens for the full season, 69 targets, pretty nice in 9 games, 88.4% route participation. But then if you look at the games with CD Lamb active, Pickens suddenly down to just 34 targets in 5 games. So just under 7 targets per game. Still, I mean, not a bad roll. 88.8% route participation, but just doesn't pop quite as much as he does in those games without CD Lamb. So all that to say, George Pickens, 9,000 projected for, 32% flex ownership, 9% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 17% in the flex, 3% of captain. So well underweight on George Pickens. Are you getting something similar?
21% flex, 8% captain. So I'm pretty close. I'm right in line with the field at captain, basically, but I am under at flex. 26% chance of being optimal. I think he's the kind of guy that does sort of make sense where, like, in the aggregate, I'll be under the field, but I still want to be getting to him at captain just because he is such a big play threat. He is reasonably priced for his ceiling. He's just not exactly reasonably priced for his median. I think that the price does skew towards like his 75th percentile projection more than his 50th, because he's going to get deep balls. If he catches one in the end zone, it's going to be a huge play. If he actually happens to catch one instead of drawing pass interference 40 yards down the field, it's a big play. So you get like just volatility from him on these big plays where, like, I always use Jameson Williams as an example, and then you correct me and remind me that I'm wrong because Jameson Williams doesn't actually have big games. But like, George Pickens is what people think Jameson Williams is. And so he is very live to catch a 50-yard pass and then catch a 60-yard touchdown. And at 9K, he's great. But then like his average game is, 4 for 60 with a 40-yard pass interference or something. So he is kind of somebody where, like, if he's not my captain, I kind of like the idea of just like not really having much of him, but then I still want those George Pickens captain lineups.
Yeah, agreed. I think that George Pickens actually looks like a good captain. And to your point, he's exactly that, where it's like he has the big plays, but then he also has another 5 catches along with the splash play. So it does add up to oftentimes over 100 yards with a touchdown. I will say JMO did finally have a 26.9 fantasy point game on DraftKings when you include the 100-yard bonus.
On crossing routes, though, not on deep balls.
They had to change everything with that's also true. They started running more crossing routes with Dan Campbell. Man, did you also think he was an idiot after his first press conference? I feel like that was like the prevailing thought.
100%.
Yeah, we all thought he was just like, we're gonna bite their knees. It was just like he was such a joke, like a running joke. And I was like,
oh yeah,
that dude's brilliant. Although they did lose pretty badly yesterday.
He checked all the boxes for somebody that was going to just come in and fall on his face, because like he's a former player. Like obviously they can be good, but like so many times it's hard to like separate being a player from coaching a team. You had the former player, you had like the insane like macho former player quotes. It was just like, oh my god, this is going to be a franchise that just goes like 3 decades into the past.
Yeah, it's funny though. So he like, I think analytics people kind of love him because he always goes for it, but then he actually, like, I think he's extra like over aggressive according to analytics, which is pretty funny. It's like everybody's like, oh, look at this guy, finally a coach that's going to go for it when you're supposed to, but then it's like the analytics say to punt and he'll still go for it.
He might not actually use analytics. He just defaults to go, whereas
he just wants to, which I also love as a fantasy player. But
and I mean, if you're going to just blindly do something, that's still going to analytically, I think, be better than the alternative.
True. So Pickens,
he might accidentally be sharp, but he is generally good.
And I also like, I think he's just like a good leader, all that stuff. I think he actually is a really good coach regardless.
I mean, I think that's the most important thing of coaching. Like, people, and obviously, I mean, myself included, when I bitch about Dan Quinn, but like, you can find ways to mask and cover up like not understanding strategy shit. But like, if you can't get a locker room of guys to like follow your lead and not kill each other and, et cetera, like, you're drawing dead.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're on the same page. Like, Pickens being underweight overall seems fine, but at captain in particular does seem like a pretty strong play. 9% ownership gets to the point where it's like, I don't know that it needs to be above that, but being about with the field seems good. Beyond those two, Ryan Flournoy is really interesting to me, and it looks like the Sims I am getting to. So Flournoy 4,600 projects for 8% flex ownership. I got to 10%, so just a bit over the field on Ryan Flournoy. You've got Kevontae Turpin at 3,000 projected for 6% flex ownership. I got to 28% in the flex and one at captain of Turpin, and then Tolbert I didn't get to any with 1% flex. What do you make of the 65% route participation for Flournoy last week? I don't know. Did I miss something here, or has he just taken over that wide receiver 3 role, do you think?
So I kind of thought that he was taking it over anyway. Like I think he's just jumped ahead of at least Tolbert. Like, to me, Turpin's like a big question mark, because like he kind of has his own skill set anyway, and then like his route participation's been kind of hit or miss. But like Turpin's route participation has been down since his injury in the 2 games, and Lamb was out, granted, so like that obviously has something to do with it too. But even like week 1, you had 49% route participation for Turpin, 21, 70, 68 in 2 games that Lamb was out. Then Turpin misses 2 games. And when Turpin and Lamb were both out, that's when you got Flournoy forced into playing more. And I think he impressed enough that he just like has a role now. Lamb returned, Turpin returned week 7, and Flournoy was still 5th. He only ran 12%. He ran routes on 12% of dropbacks. Tolbert was at 36%. But then Tolbert dropped to 17. Flournoy got to 33. So they basically flipped. And then last week, Tolbert dropped to 8%. Flournoy jumped to 67, where he was running routes ahead of both Turpin and the Tolbert. So I think it is a spot where, like, again, if you're getting a lot of Flournoy and you want less, like, you can definitely just lower him, because I think like the range for route participation for him is probably anywhere from like 30 to 65%. And a lot of that depends on exactly how much Turpin is on the field. But I do think from just like an overarching trend standpoint, he's clearly going the right direction. Tolbert is clearly going the wrong direction. And then I think Turpin's just like a massive wild card.
Yeah, I think that sums up my thoughts also. I think I like Flournoy, like just given he's not getting a ton of ownership anywhere. You've got him at 8%. I think that's around where I've seen him around the industry. I think I've seen him even lower. Um, Other places at 4,600. I think a lot of people are going to be like, I don't really want to play Ryan Flournoy at 4,600. We haven't really seen a ton from him. He did, I think he had a 100-yard game one of those weeks that CD Lamb was out, but I don't think people are going to really want to play him. In which case, I'll lean into it just for the route participation, the potential to be more involved. It is tough with all of the other receiving options available for the Cowboys, Lamb, Pickens, and Schultz. So, or not Schultz, Ferguson. So he is, fourth in the pecking order, but he saw 3 targets last game, which is not nothing. As long as he's running that many routes, I would think that it's possible for him to take on a bigger role. I think he's looked pretty good since he's been out there. So shout out Tony Sprocket, by the way, guy in my Discord who loved him last year in best ball. Yeah, I think Flournoy to me looks like a pretty strong contrarian play. It does make it really tough to get to Jalen Tolbert. But then, yeah, like you said, Turpin is just like, he has like one carry per game basically, and they even last game where he ran 21% of the routes also saw 3 targets, so like still was targeted just as much as Flournoy, even when he wasn't running any routes. They just like, when he's out there, they're like getting the ball to Turpin, so seems pretty good. So yeah, this is kind of about where I'd expect to be. I might even like Flournoy better than this, but generally happy with what I'm getting two of the Cowboy receivers. Anything else?
And I mean, to your point on Flournoy, like he's not going to get a lot of targets. He's at 0.1 targets per route run in the 4 games that he's played with Lamb active. Obviously, his role has gotten bigger, but he's still going to be behind all those guys in terms of targets per route run. Turpin, on the other hand, at 0.22, like that's more than everybody other than Lamb. But he doesn't run a ton of routes. It's just that when he's out there, they will look to get him the ball. He is averaging over 12 yards per reception, which was a number that I had to double check because it seemed high just knowing how they use him. But
Right.
like he is good. You get him the ball in space. So I am interested in them. I'm not like super confident in either one. I think that the Turpin ownership seems a little bit low at only 6%. And that's probably why he's in 44% of my lineups right now. Like 14% chance of being optimal at 6% owned. He's just going to show up a lot. But assuming that ownership number comes up, he ends up, flattening out, probably being like 15% or something.
Do you think, I think either one of them, you probably need a touchdown to pay off the price tag? Maybe you could have like a 50-yard play for Turpin gets it done or something, but like I don't think either of them gets enough volume that they're very likely to be like to get to a number that you want without scoring a touchdown. But I think both are like pretty reasonable bets to score a touchdown, essentially the bet we're making.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think you probably need them to get in the end zone. But like Flournoy is live for a big play, I guess, like a broken play, obviously. Like and that's like for somebody like Flournoy that's not getting a lot of targets per route run, just being on the field is important because obviously the more times you're out there running routes, the more likely it is that defenders lose sight of you or run into each other or whatever, and you just get the big broken play, and then everybody gets to bitch on Twitter that the idiot's playing $4,600 Flournoy got there.
Right.
But like obviously if you're on the field for 20% of dropbacks, it's not very likely that anything happens. If you're out there for 60%, it's 3 times as likely. Whereas Turpin, like it doesn't obviously like you would prefer him be on the field more for the same reasons, but he's at least somebody where like if he's on the field, a lot of times it's going to be like a design play or he's on the field because they're going to give him the ball.
Yeah.
They're never like, oh, Flournoy, go get on the field. We're going to throw you the ball now. It's
right.
They don't care.
Right. Exactly. All right. On the other side, we have Trey Tucker. I think has been the wide receiver 1 all year, but now the known wide receiver 1 because they traded away Jacoby Myers. Tucker is 6,600 projected for 25% flex ownership, 2% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I got to 19% flex, 2% captain. I guess I'm slightly surprised that I'm not getting to more of Tucker at captain. I think that's the spot where I'm like, yeah, being underweight at flex and overweight at captain would be kind of my lean on Tucker, but this is what I'm getting right now. Are you getting something similar to 2% at captain, 19% flex?
Yeah, I think I have even less than that. I have
Okay.
2% captain, 10% flex. It's kind of the same thing. I think he's another very ownership dependent guy. And it's the same thing that we talked about, whatever slate he was on after Myers got traded, where I don't think a lot changes for Trey Tucker. So it's like this weird situation where I think people didn't realize earlier on in the year how involved Trey Tucker has been as far as route participation goes. And so there's like a tendency for people to be like, oh, well, Jacoby Myers is gone. So now you have all these targets available for Trey Tucker when Trey Tucker's already been out there. And Trey Tucker is a completely different receiver than Jacoby Myers is. Like Jacoby Myers' role is going to be filled by some combination in terms of, just the routes he's running, where he's getting targeted and stuff. That's going to be filled more by some combination of Michael Mayer, Jack Besh, Tyler Lockett, guys like that, where Trey Tucker's going to continue running his highly volatile, not very efficient routes and occasionally having really big games, and then more often times having not very appealing games at all. So if you kind of more or less assume that Trey Tucker is what Trey Tucker has been all season long, it really comes down to ownership. Like if ownership is going to just shift and people are going to say, oh, well, now Trey Tucker, like he would have been, 12%, now he's 25%, then generally you're just not going to want to play that much Trey Tucker. But if ownership still comes in at like 15%, like it would have in week 2 at 6,600, then by all means, like he looks good because he's going to be on the field a ton. He is capable of making big plays. So he's one guy where a lot more than usual, like ownership really is going to shift a lot for me. Like when you think about, wide receiver ones generally, CeeDee Lamb, you can tell me he's 70% owned. And like, yeah, I'm going to end up getting less of him and I'm going to, want less, but like, I'm still going to play a bunch of CeeDee Lamb. I don't really care. Trey Tucker, like you can pretty quickly get to an ownership number where I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to play Trey Tucker.
Right. Yeah. If 50% of the field is playing him, then I'm like, yeah, I probably don't want to play a ton of Trey Tucker. This is like to me the 2% captain ownership to me is more appealing than the 25% flex. Maybe that's just because he had the 40% fantasy point game. So I'm like, he's capable
kind of like
a
poor man's, like all the logic we laid out about George Pickens captain. He's kind of like the poor man's George Pickens.
Yeah, exactly. So I might try to get more at captain, but that's, I don't know. I think that he's ultimately fine. Like you said, he's so boom bust that it is very, very ownership dependent.
4% chance of being optimal at captain, 2% ownership.
Yeah. So that looks good to me, but I only got 2% in this run of the Sims.
I have him actually pretty similar, like in terms of like relative to the field, what I have with Pickens. Like I have 3% Tucker at captain, so slightly over the field, and then I'm like half the field, give or take, at flex. That's basically more or less what I did with Pickens also.
Let's look at just week 10 because we only have one game since they traded Jacoby Myers. So that I don't think it affects Trey Tucker, but it does obviously affect all the other receivers on the team. Because if you look at the route share report, Jacoby Myers actually is not showing up here anymore, but he was running a lot of routes for the Raiders. Looking at just week 10, Tyler Lockett, 6 targets in that game on 65.7% route participation. So kind of seemed to take over as the wide receiver 2 for the Raiders. He's 3,400, projected for 26% flex, 1% captain ownership. I actually just got to 17% flex, 1% captain using those numbers, which I think is fine. Like I think he's mispriced. So he's a bit too cheap for the wide receiver 2 role, but also like kind of seems like he has capped upside. I don't know if you agree with that. What are you doing with Tyler Lockett?
Yeah, I'm getting like half the field right now, but I think a lot of like how much Tyler Lockett I get to is going to depend on where ownership ends up coming in on like Kevontae Turpin, for example. Because if Tyler Lockett's going to be right now, he's projected for 26% flex and Turpin is 6%. It's a $400 price difference. Lockett is projected like 2.5, 3 points higher than Turpin, but there's enough volatility in there when you're talking about wide receivers and, wide receivers that are projected for like, 4 to 8 fantasy points. There's so much volatility there that like, I'm just going to take whichever one is getting a quarter of the ownership of the other one. If Turpin, like I think is going to happen, ends up coming in at like 15% or something, and Lockett is sitting there at like 20, then yeah, I'm going to end up more balanced between them and probably getting to a bit more Lockett just because he does project better. He ran more routes last week than everybody on the team other than Trey Tucker and Brock Bowers. He was actually targeted a lot. He more targets per route run than everybody other than Mostert, who ran 3 routes, and Michael Mayer. The kind of overarching question is like, how long do the Raiders keep doing this before they do something else? But at the same time, you and I talked about it going into last week. There was like this assumption that, now it's Jack Besh with Jacoby Meyer gone, but Jack Besh has pretty clearly played his way out of playing time. They were giving him playing time. They weren't happy with what they saw, and he stopped getting it. And then you also have the Pete Carroll, Tyler Lockett thing, which, again, not to go too far down narrative street, but like, I don't think it can be completely ignored that they have this relationship. And then again, we do have a game now where he just threw Tyler Lockett into a ton of routes. So your like baseline assumption should pretty quickly be moving towards like, oh, okay, it's going to be Tyler Lockett, at least for now. So it feels like one of those things where like there's going to be a game between now and the end of the season where the bottom just falls out and suddenly Tyler Lockett is not running a bunch of routes, but there's no actual reason to assume that that's today. And I think with the information that we have, all assumptions should be that Tyler Lockett's running more routes than anybody other than Trey Tucker as far as wide receivers go.
Yeah, I mean, and we love Tyler Lockett in that last game because it was like, oh, he's coming in at low ownership at a low salary number. And there's all this narrative of like, I mean, he won a Super Bowl with Pete Carroll and they've been together for forever. And then they were separated and Pete Carroll brought him onto the team. So it's like, there was just so much to like about him, but now he's getting, the price has come up a little bit. The ownership has come up significantly. And then suddenly becomes less of a, like, this is my favorite play on the slate and more like a, yeah, I guess he's still fine, like at 3,400, just because the ownership is so high. If he was 3,400 and getting 5% ownership, I'd be like, yeah, wheels up for Tyler Lockett, but pretty chalky at this point.
Well, I think another thing that like is just really volatile, and I don't have an answer necessarily, is what is he at this point? Because like, last game, 0.26 targets per route run in his first game playing full time with Geno. When he was on the Titans, he wasn't getting targets at all. You're talking about playing with, the corpse of Calvin Ridley, even though he's younger than Lockett, but like he's just so washed. Like you're talking about playing with Ridley, you're talking about playing with Io Manor and DK, and like there should be infinite targets available. But he's not getting any of them. Is that just that Cam Ward is incompetent? Is it that Tyler Lockett is completely washed? And then Tyler Lockett comes over to Geno, and Geno's just like, yeah, I'm going to feed you the ball. So there's a lot of volatility there. And like, I don't think that you just project Tyler Lockett to suddenly be getting targeted 1 out of every 4 routes that he runs. If you are going to do that, then he's like the best play on the slate, probably at 3,400. But like the answer is probably somewhere in the middle again of what he was in Tennessee and what he was last game. But like, that's just a whole other spot where if you're not getting quite as much Tyler Lockett as like you think you should have, you have plenty of room to increase him or vice versa, or whatever, because it's not just still kind of a guessing game in how many routes he runs. It's still very much a guessing game in how often is he being targeted in this offense compared to what we were seeing last year in Seattle and then this year in Tennessee.
Adam, I need to address this comment in chat because I feel like this is like the opposite of how I view Tucker and Wan'Dale. Like I view Wan'Dale as being like he's going to get a bunch of targets, doesn't make that many big plays, and Tucker is like he's not going to see that many targets, but when he is targeted, he can make big plays. Am I totally wrong, or what do you think of this comparison? Trey Tucker to Wan'Dale.
Tucker's Slayton.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah,
Tucker is like the big play guy who it's like if he hits on his targets can make big plays, whereas Wan'Dale is like you're hoping for 12 targets and then
Wan'Dale's a slot guy. Like, well, I mean now not as much, I guess, because they lost all their outside guys, but like in a functioning offense, it's Slayton and Neighbors outside with Wan'Dale in the slot.
Yeah, obviously we're reducing it to make a point, but like I think that is the wrong way to think of Tucker. Tucker is like he's not likely to see all that many targets, but you're just hoping that on one of his targets he has a 50-yard touchdown and gets there that way.
8.6 ADOT for Wan'Dale Robinson so far this season.
It's only 9 for Tucker, so that was the one part that I was really? Like, yeah, at least in fantasy points, I was like, maybe I'm wrong about this. Like, I think historically, Trey Tucker has always been that guy, but
only 9.2 for Tucker.
Yeah, so not that far off in terms of ADOT.
What was he last year? I'm looking. I don't know.
All right,
I'll have it in a second.
All right. Well, then I'll continue to bring up the stats and numbers for the rest of the Raiders receivers. Dante Thornton, I also think of being
12.4 like, last year for Tucker.
Okay. Yeah. So this year is seeing.
Yeah. This I think is just a Geno effect.
Okay. That makes sense.
But yeah, somebody's just said it in chat. Wandale's Myers.
Yeah, exactly. Dante Thornton, I also think of as being the same sort of archetype to some extent as Trey Tucker, where it's like you really want that big play. Otherwise, he's probably not going to get there. Dante Thornton, though, we saw kind of an expansion of his role in that last game. Again, the first game without Jacoby Myers, Dante Thornton ran 51.4% of the routes, targeted twice, 11 ADOT on those 2 targets. But Dante Thornton becomes fairly interesting here. Again, if we look at the route share report for Thornton, it was 70% in week 7. I think he was a healthy scratch in week 9 and then came back and yeah, he was. And Pete Carroll talked about like, yeah, we just didn't have a spot for him. He has not, that was where Pete Carroll was like, he hasn't been producing. We just need him to produce. And then week 10, he was active with no Jacoby Myers and ran 51.4% of the routes. And Jack Besh still just 20% of the routes after they talked about like, oh, he's going to get his opportunities with Jacoby Myers gone, only ran 20% of the routes. So I know your least favorite thing to do is talking about rookies, but Dante Thornton, 2,000, Jack Besh, 1,000. What's your level of interest?
I have more Thornton. I have 19% Thornton at flex. I actually have 2% at captain too. I have 4% Besh, but again, this is an ownership thing because right now Thornton's projected for 15% ownership at 2K. Besh is projected for 14% at 1K. This has nothing even to do with like any sort of talent evaluation of them, or I don't think you even have to get into like the different types of routes that they run or anything like that. I think this is as simple as, for all intents and purposes, they're the same price. Most lineups where you can get to 1K Besh, or a lot of lineups, you can get to 1K Besh. You can also get to 2K Thornton. And in the first game without Jacoby Myers, you had 60% route participation for Thornton. You had 20 for Besh. So those just shouldn't be 2 guys that are the same ownership. So right now, I'd be getting more Thornton. I think if you do see Besh's ownership come down a bit, like for example, some of this Besh ownership probably ends up going to Kevontae Turpin, even though Turpin is more expensive. If you see that come down, then like, yeah, Besh does become more interesting because again, last week doesn't, it's not just like necessarily going to be replicated this week.
Right.
Besh is somebody that in terms of what he does on the field, you would think gets some of that Jacoby Myers leftover role, even though seemingly he's just not who they've seen enough of him, it seems like. But there's always that, oh, well, that's the week that Jack Besh broke out and you're not going to know until it happens kind of thing. But the way it's being projected right now, I'm just going to play Thornton more than I'm going to play Besh because with the information I have, Thornton's going to be on the field quite a bit more than Besh is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Looking at these numbers, I'll give the most recent quote we have on the receivers outside of Trey Tucker was from the 5th. So that was before the last game. Maybe not. Maybe we just want to look at the numbers from the most recent game as a better indicator of what to expect. But before that game on the 5th, Pete Carroll said Dante Thornton will be active this week on what Carroll wants to see from him. He said, just keep growing. He's growing every day. He's always playing hard. This is a great chance for him to answer. It's a great chance for Tyler Lockett to answer too and help us out. I did not like not having him last week. And then he said, Jack Besh is going to get more turns. He's been working really hard. His role is becoming clear. So you'll see that as we get moving forward, his role is becoming clear. So yeah, his role again in that game was 20% route participation last week. I think that makes sense. So yeah, just Thornton looks pretty good at 2,000 if he's not going to get any more ownership than Jack Besh. Jack Besh is less expensive. But yeah, Thornton looks like the better play just based on what we've seen recently and has that big play upside. Whereas Jack Besh, I don't know to what extent he can make those big 50-yard splash plays. I guess we haven't seen it as much from Besh.
Just thinking about how pissed off I'd be if like I get benched in a baseball game and the coach just comes over and goes, your role is getting more clear.
That's really funny. Yeah.
And one thing I will point out too with the ownership between them, like even if you do assume that Thornton's going to be on the field more, again, it just goes back to the volatility that comes with, these low projection wide receivers. Like last week, you had basically Thornton on the field 3 times as much as Besh, and Thornton got 2 targets and Besh got 1. So like there's plenty of games, 1 game sample sizes where even if it's the same thing and it's 3-1 Thornton on the field, like Besh just beats Thornton. Like it's still entirely possible. It's really just, again, if they're going to be the same ownership, then you're essentially just choosing which one is more likely to happen, which is the guy on the field more. But like the ownership gap doesn't have to get that big before you would want to be mixing in Besh and saying like, okay, he's still 42% to beat Thornton or something like that.
Yeah. We got a super chat from Sean saying, Neil, Adam, favorite captain as of right now. And Adam didn't say Neil, just said Adam, love your breakdowns, bro. Keep
That
it
was
going.
intentional.
I mean, that's just super offensive. And you're a Skins fan. Bonus. He also pointed out that you brought up Chris Cooley. Chris Cooley, his only Washington jersey, which I think I've seen a picture of it. Favorite captain as of thank you, Sean. Really appreciate that. Adam, who is your favorite captain?
I mean, CeeDee Lamb by a lot right now. Beyond that, I mean, this is a fun game because I can just name good players and like I can't be wrong. I mean, it's CeeDee Lamb right now, and then there's like a drop. But again, I do think that so like right now, CeeDee Lamb is projected to be the tied with Ashton Genty for the 4th highest owned captain. I'd be surprised if CeeDee Lamb's the 4th highest owned captain by lock.
Yeah.
But behind him, it's Dak and Bowers.
Yeah, like Bowers is going to be my answer. He's projected for 4% more ownership than CeeDee Lamb. The price tag, like he's only 8,000. So I guess I'll go with Bowers. You take Lamb, I'll take Bowers, but those are the two to me that stand out as my favorites. Yeah, I think both look like great plays if these ownership numbers hold. Alex Bachman, not somebody I've given any consideration to. He has 800 projected for 1% ownership. You get into any Alex Bachman?
I would really hope not.
Ran 6% of routes last week.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, no, I don't have him. I mean, he's 800. I guess like if you're playing Lepke and you're playing Lauby, and you have $800 left, like, and you're playing a bunch of lineups, like you can mix in Bachman. Like he's in that bucket, I guess. Maybe he'll catch a pass, but I would put him behind the other two because 1, he's more expensive, and 2, I think the other 2 are more likely to touch the ball.
Yeah. Agreed. All right, let's move on to tight ends, where again, just brought up Bowers, only 8,000 for Brock Bowers, projected for 40% flex ownership, 17% captain ownership. Using those numbers, I actually came in overweight at captain, 22%, a bit underweight with 34% flex ownership. Bit of a misprice here for Bowers, just 600 more expensive than Jake Ferguson. How much interest do you have in Brock Bowers?
A lot, because obviously he's really good and theoretically there's more targets available. But right now I'm actually getting below the field. 23% at flex at 40% projected ownership, 13 at captain at 17% projected ownership. I clearly think Bowers looks really good and I'd like to have more. I still think the ownership matters though, just because there's so much uncertainty in what Vegas is doing. And you and I talked about it the other day and then just ended up, I mean, not being wrong because we were just reciting what had happened the game before, but like the Raiders did something completely different than they had done the game before. Yeah. They had used Bowers like as a wide receiver. They were running Bowers out wide. They were running him from the slot. He had like a really high target per route run. And if you went back and looked at like the full season, he's like 0.3 or more targets per route run when he lines up out wide. And so it was like, man, if they're going to do that, like if that's what they're going to do to fill in for Jacoby Myers, they're going to run Michael Mayer more from the slot. They're going to run Bowers outside. Like Bowers is just going to have monster game after monster game in this role. But then last week they went to a lot of Dante Thornton outside. They only 20% of Bowers' routes were out wide. He ran 33% in the slot. He had 0.08 targets per route run. That was the fewest of anybody that was targeted last week, less than Tucker, less than Thornton, less than Besh. Obviously, you're not expecting that again, but it does point to that they're going to just use him in different ways game to game, and not necessarily be forcing the ball to him, and not necessarily always, or clearly not always, using him as a wide receiver like they had 2 games ago. So it ends up coming back to ownership because, like, if he's a 40 or combined 60+% owned $8,000 tight end, obviously he's good, he projects well, but there's plenty of good players in this game and he's getting a ton of ownership. If he's going to be the wide receiver that he was 2 weeks ago, he's the most mispriced guy on the entire slate. And I don't know how they're going to use him. So if ownership's going to end up coming in, like somebody like this, I think does tend to come in a little bit over-owned because people are so sensitive to median projection relative to price. And by people, I mostly mean Sims and optimizers. So you're just going to get optimizers and Sims just jamming in the guy that for his median projection is, let's say, $1,000 too cheap when, and it's going to choose him over guys that are correctly priced or $200 too cheap or whatever. When you consider a range of outcomes, though, plenty of these guys have meat on the bone at their salaries, for lack of a better phrase. So ownership still matters a lot, even though clearly I like Brock Bowers a lot. If they have trouble running, going back to the Quinnen Williams thing, like maybe Genty keeps getting stuffed and so they have to throw more, and that's better for Bowers. But I just think the ownership matters. I care a little bit more about the ownership for Bowers than I generally do for your superstar level players, just because there is this volatility and uncertainty, not only in will the Raiders offense move the ball, because that's always its own question. They have the talent to be a good offense, but half the time they are completely incompetent. But then there's also, are they using Brock Bowers as a tight end that lines up in the slot sometimes, like last week, or are they using him as a wide receiver 1 like they did 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, I think that is a really good point. But is this Jesse? I've been trying to figure out if this person is Jesse. Just under a different name now. So Bowers, just looking at his usage the past couple weeks. So this is week 9, 37% out wide, 51% from the slot, just 11% in line. And then last week it was 20% out wide, 60% from the slot, 20% in line. So 80% in the slot or in line last week. On the surface, like looking at the matchup for tight ends, because generally the matchup with Dallas is good across the board. Tight ends is the one spot where it's actually not a great matchup. Looks like it's about middle of the pack in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. And I was just looking at slot receivers because he runs so much from the slot. Also not that great for slot receivers. It's really, really good for receivers out wide, which he does some of. It's the third best matchup for out wide receivers. But again, just 20% out wide last week for Brock Bowers. Now, I don't know if any of that matters. Like if they're just able to move the ball on Dallas, like you would think Brock Bowers benefits. So from a matchup standpoint, it is, I think, a good matchup, but maybe not as great as it would be in some ways. But I did want to read off some quotes on Brock Bowers because I think it goes without saying that the team is aware that they want to get him the ball more. On the 6th in the post-game presser, Pete Carroll said, "We were trying to get the ball to Brock Bowers all night long. The calls were going that way, and the ball just didn't get there. We didn't try to disguise it. We had calls one after another, and Denver did a nice job of getting guys on him." So I guess Denver was just able to shut him down. On the 14th, offensive coordinator Chip Kelly, so this is this week, said, "We have to get Brock Bowers involved. He's obviously our number one threat out there, and we got to continue to get him involved. We got sacked on a lot of the plays that were supposed to go to him in the Denver game. Somebody that big, that strong, that powerful, but that can run that fast is truly unique. That's what makes him what I really think is the top tight end in the league." On why it's so easy for Bowers to create separation, he said, "God, there are not many people like Brock. His work ethic is outstanding. What he does every single day, from film study to how he takes care of his body to the work he does in practice. He's one of those truly special kids. He gets pissed off when we take him out for a play in practice. His mindset in terms of getting so good at his craft is what really makes him a special player, along with some God-given talent that not many people have." So they clearly are like, it reminds me of like the JMO coach speak of like, we let him down, not getting the ball to JMO more. And the Lions actually did get it to him more. But yeah, seems like he is obviously going to be a focal point for the offense. But it's obviously not great to hear that Denver was just able to shut him down even when he was a focal point.
I think Denver can do things that Dallas can't, though.
I think that's also true.
To me, Dante Thornton's the big thing, and like it's not that Dante Thornton's taking targets from Brock Bowers. That would be an insane thing to say or to think. Like I do think Bowers is obviously going to get targeted more, and like this, again, everything relative. Bowers projects really well, no matter what your assumptions are. But it's just a matter of like, does he project better than Genty? Does he project better than Geno? Or is he fifth? And he's obviously the fifth most expensive also. But the biggest concern that I would have about Bowers, and again, this is in the context of like Brock Bowers is really good no matter what, but the more routes that Dante Thornton is running, the less routes that Bowers is running outside, which from a fantasy standpoint is really what you have wanted this year. It's where he earns the most targets. Because like, Tucker is going to be on the field for like every drop back, and he's running outside. Lockett is apparently going to be on the field for like every play that they have 3 wide receivers, and he's running from the slot. So if Thornton's going to get a lot of run again, that's moving Bowers inside, or he's running from the slot if Lockett happens to not be on the field. If they were to just like cut Thornton back from 60% to 20% or something, then you can have Bowers outside more. Also, it would impact, Michael Mayer. So like, Bowers is good one way or the other, but I am a little bit more sensitive to the ownership just because like it seems like they're going to use Thornton more, which means he's going to be on the field out wide, and it means you're going to have Bowers just running routes from less advantageous spots.
Yeah. I think it was Emerald. Somebody said the matchup with the tight end is going to affect Michael Mayer more than Bowers, which I would agree with that. Michael Mayer runs like exclusively as a tight end. Also saw a reduction in his routes last week. I don't know if you have any grand takeaway from the route participation for Michael Mayer. Was 80% week 6, 80% week 7, 70% week 9, and then down to 40% in week 10. Is that a concern for you? Are you moving away from Michael Mayer's 4,000 projected for 16% total ownership? And I got right with the field there. Are you similar?
Yeah, I mean, it's a concern. It's just a trickle down of everything I was just saying about Thornton and Bowers. Like, Thornton wasn't playing 2 weeks ago when you got Bowers at wide receiver, and you also got 72% route participation from Michael Mayer. That was a game where you had Tucker run every route. The first game without, I think it was the first game without Myers.
I thought it was last game was the first game.
Oh yeah, last game was the first game without Myers. Yeah, okay, that's why it looks so blank. But yeah, you had Tucker run 100%. Lockett only ran 28%. You didn't have Thornton active. Besh didn't run any routes. I don't remember if he was active or not. So you essentially had 2.5 wide receivers, and then Bowers and Mayer. Last game, Besh runs 20 to 25%. Lockett's a full-time wide receiver. Thornton's basically a full-time wide receiver in addition to Tucker. So you're just going to lose routes, period, for Michael Mayer, and you're going to lose those wide receiver routes for Bowers. So it's all just, kind of a trickle down of what the Raiders seemingly want to do with their wide receivers, and that seems to be give Lockett a full-time role, and I assume Thornton, but give one of Thornton or Besh a real role. It's, the routes have to come from somewhere. Like, none of those are guys that you're expecting to get targeted at a higher frequency than Bowers or even Mayer necessarily, but you do expect them to kick Mayer off the field a bit.
I guess I would have thought that the routes would have come just from Jakobi Meyers. Like, I guess that's the part that, like, Jakobi Meyers ran 95.3% of the routes in week 9, his final game with the Raiders. So I guess it was surprising to me to see, like, because like Thornton didn't just take up all of those routes, and Jack Besh, like, even adding them together, right, they didn't run as many routes. But I guess it's Tyler Lockett is, like you said, is taking on a ton of that work.
Yeah, and it's also, remember, Bowers was out a lot. So like,
right,
for a lot of the season, they've been without some combination of Myers, Bowers. So you kind of removed one receiver in Myers, but you added like 2 to 3 with now Thornton running real routes, Lockett running real routes, Bowers being back, Besh being at 20% or whatever.
True. But like, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if Michael Mayer bounces back to 50%, north of 50% route participation. I don't think that this is necessarily a trend to less work for Michael Mayer. It could be. I mean, it might be that the rookies continue to get more involved. But I just, at this point, I don't think that this is necessarily a pattern that I'm going to worry about Michael Mayer continuing to lose his role. So I think I'm still good with him at this percentage.
I mean, the games that he's played with Brock Bowers this year, he's at 40%, 20%. Game he got hurt, 72% and 40%. I mean, I think expecting 40 to 50% is, I have 50% right now route participation for Mayer. Like, I think that 72 was an outlier.
Okay, you think that just week 9 was the outlier? That actually, that makes sense.
Yeah, like he went 80, 90, 72, but in the 80 and 90 game, Bowers was out. So
right.
In the full games that Bowers and Mayer have played together, it's 40, 21, 72, and 40. And that 72 was when you didn't have Thornton, you didn't have Besh, you had barely Tyler Lockett.
Okay. That makes sense. So this was the game. I think we did a showdown slate on week 9 or maybe a Sunday night. I don't remember, but I remember being really into Michael Mayer for the week 10 game because he had run 70% even with Brock Bowers back, and I was all excited about that. And then he only ran 40% in that
Right.
game. And I guess I expected that Dante Thornton returning was not going to take on 50% of the work. Like,
Right.
it was not going to be after he was a healthy scratch in week 9. But yeah, I guess this could be that we're just trending toward more Thornton, and we see Mayer kind of continue with this, which he
And
still
it
looks
could
fine.
completely change.
Yeah.
But it's like the way that I'm thinking about it is basically like, and our assumption going into last game was that Lockett would probably play more than he had 2 weeks ago, but I don't think we were expecting 80%.
Right.
And Thornton, yeah, like maybe him and Besh each run like 20 to 30%, and neither of them run 60. Like, the more that Thornton's playing, the more, unless one of Thornton or Lockett takes a step back in routes without Besh stepping forward, you run out of routes from there.
Right. Yeah, but like, you're okay with this 16% ownership? I mean, at 40% rep participation seems okay.
Yeah, he still earns targets. He's still there's that volatility there too. Like, at 4K, if it's not like this is set in stone that 100-year-old Tyler Lockett and non-existent until last week Dante Thornton are going to combine for 140% route participation either. Like, you could just have a game that they play differently. There's just a lot of volatility in the personnel that the Raiders use, and we know that when Mayer's running routes, he does earn targets. So you have that volatility, but then also, like, even if it is 45-50%, he earns targets. He's only 4K. Like, he does look good here, or look good enough.
I like that every time somebody mentions Tyler Lockett's age, it gets progressively older every time. We just saw Spelkowski, 45-year-old Lockett. Somebody else was talking about his age earlier, but it was like 35, which it's probably his actual age. And then you're calling him 100 years old. Yeah, he is getting old, and he has been bald since he was 28 or something. So seems older than he actually is too. Ian Thomas, I'm getting to 0.3%.
I think.
I think that might be true with Tyler Lockett. Yeah, good point. Ian, just a classic backup tight end. You're hoping for a catch at his price tag. Probably not going to happen.
Thomas?
Yeah. Kickers and defenses. This is one that the ETR guys talk about Brandon Aubrey all the time, as everybody loves him, and he ends up getting steamed in terms of his ownership. $5,400 Brandon Aubrey only being projected for, I mean, I guess you are projecting him for 30% flex ownership, 2% captain. So you are projecting him to be quite chalky. I got to 18%. Daniel Carlson projected for 19%. I got right there, 19 plus 0.3 a captain. Cowboys defense 4,200 projected for 15 and 1 a captain. I got to 17 and 0.3. And the Raiders defense 3,600 projected for just 6% ownership, and I only got to 5%. So even at 6% ownership, 3,600 Raiders defense, not really looking great. What are you doing with the kickers and defenses?
Yeah, I got 16% Dallas. I got 6% Raiders. So that's about the same as the field. 15% Carlson, which is close to the field. The only like notable stand one way or the other is that I only got to 19% Aubrey. Obviously, if you want to play more Aubrey, great. I do think, I was thinking about this the other day, like, it's not that it matters in the context of DFS, but I would guess that like Brandon Aubrey has lost more value than anyone else with the new kicker situation, because like he used to be the only guy that just could consistently go out there and hit 55 to 65 yard field goals, and then now with the new with the K balls and everything, like everybody's doing it. You don't get enough opportunities for like even if now it's like, well, everybody can make a 55 yarder, but he's one of the only ones that can make a 65 yarder. You're not getting that many opportunities for 65 yarders anyway, and it's only a 1 point difference between that and the 55 yarder anyway. So like I think that, like, obviously he's still very, very good and somebody that like is fine to play in Showdown, but like if like you still had kickers on classic slates and stuff, I assume that like Aubrey would just be going massively over-owned all season long, because like I think it's not that he's gotten any worse. It's just that like through no fault of his own, everybody else is kind of like caught up from an ability to kick long field goal standpoint.
Yeah. But still, I mean, with this level of ownership, I assume you're also getting underweight on Aubrey.
Yeah,
do you have any other stands on kickers and defenses?
No, and that's the way that I would like it to stay, because I certainly don't think that I have any sort of edge in kicker or defense projection.
Yeah, I think that this all makes sense to me. I wouldn't mind getting into more Raiders just because it's a defense at 3,600 at low ownership. Like usually I see a defense at 3,600, 6% ownership, and that's like I want to get to that. But they are playing against the Cowboys, who just put up like 40 points regularly. So I don't know. Maybe that's fine.
No, I didn't even know. I don't know that I've ever looked at kicker scoring in my life. I guess you don't even get 6 points for 60 yarders.
Oh yeah. 5 is the max.
Yeah, so
unfortunately,
like really lost value.
Yeah, for real. I mean, I guess they're more likely to attempt it if you can hit a 65 yarder, so you're more likely to get that 5 points. But yeah. All right. I think that is all we have to say about the slate. Do you have anything else you want to say about the slate?
I think it's just a interesting one to like realize that there's a ton of input volatility and projections outside of just the natural volatility that comes with a game. Particularly on the Raiders side, obviously, since it's only the second game without Myers, and there's a lot of different like personnel stuff they could do. But even on the Cowboys side, since we have kind of seen fluctuations with like Flournoy's role and with Turpin's role, I think that it's definitely a slate where ownership is going to have a bigger role than usual.
Yeah, I agreed, and that could change between now and lock. As far as inactives, I guess we're really just looking for the backup Cowboys running back. I think is the most impactful thing we're looking for. You can always get surprises in terms of inactives, but I will be back prior to lock, 80 to 85 minutes prior to lock, breaking down the whole thing again after we get inactives. I'll be making my lineups with Run the Sims on the stream tonight. If you want to check out Run the Sims, you can get 50% off your first payment on any NFL product using promo code Neil. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already done so. We're going to get out of here. Thanks as always, Adam. Thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll be back, or I'll be back tonight. We'll be back on Thursday. Good luck tonight, everybody. We'll see you later.